In this video, we'll look at more ways of implementing the lexical approach. Teachers and students can implement the lexical approach with the following types of activities: matching, sorting, gap fill, or what are sometimes called close exercises, labelling pictures, and using sentence heads. Matching exercises are where you match vocabulary to pictures of the thing the vocabulary describes. Sorting activities require you to sort vocabulary into particular categories. Gap fill activities are where you fill in the gaps in a text with the vocabulary you're learning. Labelling pictures is pretty obvious. You label the different parts of a picture with the new words. Finally, sentence heads are the phrases which start a sentence and can then be followed by your ideas or opinions. The lexical approach in particular recommends that we abandon transformational exercises where we try to put words into a different order. This is because such exercises are more like doing a puzzle than actually speaking a language. This is particularly the case with decontextualized sentences where the student has no reference or reason for producing a new sentence. Again, it's more like doing a puzzle than real communication. We also want to use input-rich resources. And contrary to standard teacher training, this can include increased teacher talk time, so that the students are exposed to real, naturally spoken English roughly tuned to the student's level. You also want to focus on probable rather than possible language. So for example, in answer to the question, would you like tea? While it's possible to say, no thanks, I've just drunk one, it's more natural to say, I've just had one. It's important to remember at this point that a lot of English EFL grammar is misanalyzed. For example, reported speech, modals, passives, and conditionals. As such, it's better to learn via phrases because that's closer to how children learn their first language. As children, we learn by copying our parents, family and friends, and then receive some explicit rules-based instruction later at school. And we can do the same learning English as a second language. Learn by phrases first and check the grammatical rules later. We also want to engage in some learner training. We want to increase our students' awareness of the language they're learning and to notice phrases and collocations. We want to increase their monitoring skills so that they can reflect on their own learning and whether they are using natural phrases and collocations. And we want to encourage risk-taking so that they try to use new language rather than just the words they already know. By the same token, we want to decrease concern with accuracy, the desire to understand every word, and the student's perception of failure. This is so they focus on communication, meaning, and experimenting with new language. However, this does not mean that error correction is not important. When students make mistakes, we should help them reformulate what they want to say so that it sounds natural and typical of what a fluent English speaker would say. We should also remember that many grammatical errors are often the fault of deficient lexis. They have often not used a phrase correctly. We can also use error correction as an opportunity for further lexical exploration, asking our students, what else can we say in this situation? Or what other adjectives can we use here? When marking written work, we can make use of process writing, whereby students receive correction and then rewrite it again using the corrected language as well as any other improvements they can think of. In this phase, and indeed more generally, we can use concordance programs. Concordance programs are software which scan huge banks of text for examples of the word or phrase you want to use. For example, on the commercial concordance program Ludwig.guru, we can search for the phrase, I prefer to ask, and it will give us information about that phrase and then accurate examples of it in use in natural English. It can be nice to get students to explore language together using concordances on their computers in the classroom. Let's look now at how we can implement the lexical approach with regard to the 4 skills. When teaching speaking, we can introduce lots of sentence heads, especially ones beginning with I. For example, I love playing football, or I love painting pictures. I can't stand liars. My favourite was the first one. What I thought with Spain would be better. This is so we can enable the students to talk about themselves, which is the topic most people like talking about best, and help them to express their ideas and how they feel. For homework, we could ask them to transcribe their own speech. For example, if they had recorded themselves speaking in class, at home they could write down what they had said and then check to see if they had used the sentence heads and pronunciation features they'd been learning. They could also underline the semi-fixed expressions to help remember them. Let's look now at listening. Although it can be difficult, lots of listening is important for lower level learners to get them used to how native English speakers actually talk, both in terms of how quickly they speak and the pronunciation features that they use. You can also get them to notice the difference between spoken grammar and written grammar. For example, the use of contractions like I'm rather than I am. It's particularly good to use the tape script alongside the audio track. This makes listening easier and helps students explore the language better. You can get them to mark the phrases and collocations on the tape script, and also the pronunciation features. And what these pronunciation features produce when introduced into collocations and phrases are chunks of words, chunks of sounds. Let's look at this in a bit more detail. Noticing the sounds of chunks is as important as identifying them visually. For example, let's look at a typical tape script. Look at the first sentence. Nearly all foreign correspondents and war reporters that I've met are people who are looking for adventure. Let's identify the sentence heads, collocations and phrases. Nearly all is a sentence head. Foreign correspondents and war reporters are collocations. That I've met are is a verb phrase. And people who are looking for adventure is a noun phrase. What pronunciation features can we see here? Between nearly and all, we have the intrusive y to make nearly all, nearly all. The first collocation, foreign correspondence, links to the conjunction and to make correspondent sand, sand, correspondent sand, foreign correspondent sand. That links to I've to make that I've, t've, that I've. And met links to are to make metar, tar, metar, that I've metar. Who were would reduce to who were, the schwa sound who were, who were. Looking would contract to looking, looking, who were looking, who were looking. For would reduce to f, again the schwa sound f, f. And then the intrusive r would come in between f and adventure to make for adventure, for adventure. So as part of the lexical approach, we also need to practice pronunciation features such as stress, intonation and suprasegmental elements. What do we mean by suprasegmental elements? We mean linking sounds, reduction, intrusion, elision and assimilation. And we can use drilling to reinforce them. Here's a typical classroom whiteboard with the pronunciation features marked on the phrases and semi-fixed expressions. Reading should be the priority for higher level learners so that they are exposed to a wide range of new lexis. And we should get them to interact with the text, encouraging noticing, underlining and recording new phrases and collocations. We can get them to think about, why did the author use that phrase, as their knowledge of English grows? Or, as we explore collocation, we could give students a list of nouns from the text and ask them to find which verbs are used with these nouns, to reinforce the fact that certain words collocate with certain other words. We can also do writing tasks based on interesting texts and get the students to use the new lexis. Notice how this student has highlighted new collocations in the newspaper. For writing skills, it depends on the needs of the group or student, but it can be good to get them to produce writing in groups. This takes advantage of their differing knowledge and cognitive styles and is a communicative activity in itself. Here you see students underlining and recording the collocations and phrases that appear in the text we wrote together on the board. Group writing with the lexical approach is particularly useful for IELTS, especially Task 1, which asks students to describe graphs, diagrams, processes and maps. Here you can see how we've broken up a Task 1 question into sentence heads, phrases and collocations so that we can quickly rewrite it as an introductory paragraph. And again, we can use the error correction phase to do some process writing, encouraging students to improve a piece of writing after correction rather than just forgetting about it. Here's a typical whiteboard from an IELTS writing class. We have the answer we wrote together on the left. And on the right, we have the lexis we used, recorded as sentence heads, collocations and phrases to remind us later. Finally, let's look at what a sample lesson using the lexical approach might contain. A typical class might make use of concordance activities, or searching for new vocabulary, or checking new vocabulary with Google. You might do some dictionary work. You might do some vocabulary matching and sorting exercises. You might record the vocabulary from those exercises and do further lexical work. You might explore the pronunciation features of the vocabulary you're learning. You will more than likely do some speaking practice, and as part of that, you'll do some error correction. And for homework, you can set a transcription activity, asking the students to transcribe a piece of speaking and then highlight the collocations and phrases. So that's our introduction to the lexical approach. See you in the classroom.